which I guess is an answer, though. Theoretically, you'd want to deal with the High Priest with them. Otherwise, you can... there's an Orzhov Charm in Brian's deck, but not very many... Yeah, 2 Orzhov Charms for Taylor to deal with the 5/5 tokens, but the fact that you can continually pump them out, is one of the win cons for the deck.
So Young Wolf comes over, gets in, scratching Taylor's life total, and or maybe biting it, I don't know, whatever wolves do. And we've got Cartel... Oh,
he's going to immediately make a 5/5 with it.
And yes, Cartel Aristocrat comes down and then sacrifices the wolf, makes it, gets its Undying counter there, +1/+1, and then taps 3 creatures with the Skurstag High Priest and makes the 5/5.
This is one of the powers of the powerful interactions of the Junk Aristocrats deck, is that it's able to make a 5/5 demon on turn 3 using cards like Young Wolf and Cartel Aristocrat.
Right, and the synergies in this deck are like unreal. They go kind of... you feel like you have so many options in so many scenarios.
Well, it's not just Cartel Aristocrat that can pull this off. The deck also plays 2 Varols, the Scar Stripes. There's a lot of, and then there's also has Voice of Resurgence in place of Young Wolf. There's a lot of redundancy to really make that High Priest good, which is why the deck runs 4.
Yeah, I mean, being able to trigger Morbid at will is kind of the hallmark of these Aristocrat decks because of cards like Cartel Aristocrat, Falconwrath Aristocrat, and like you said, Varols. Being able to activate the Skurstag High Priest very quickly. So Taylor's going to cast a Lingering Souls and gets a couple spirits. Notably on Taylor's side of the board, he does not actually play the Skurstag High Priest.
Yeah, so the Act 2 deck, instead, cut some of those synergy things like High Priest so that it could play cards like Falconwrath Aristocrat and fit in that Boros Reckoner combo. It may cost him a couple points in the mirror, though. Cards like Falconwrath Aristocrat, not a huge player in the matchup.
So Doomed Traveler comes down for BBD, and he has assembled quite the army. He's got an undead Young Wolf, a Skurstag High Priest, a Cartel Aristocrat, a 5/5 Demon, and the fresh Doomed Traveler.
Doomed Traveler, another just redundant piece for that turn 3 Skurstag make a 5/5 place. You can start it on a Young Wolf or a Doomed Traveler, turn 2 High Priest, and then turn 3 can be an Aristocrat or a Varols, and immediately you're making 5/5s. His clock is just very fast right now.
And he's in a situation here where he can easily just play one more guy and get another 5/5.
Right, so I mean, you have to think he has a guy in hand. Otherwise, he would be leaving back Cartel Aristocrat.
Exactly. He's some reason to, some way to get another 5/5. So we've got a Spirit Token jumping in the way to help preserve Taylor's life total.
Right, Blood Artist is going to be give a lot of points of life swing in this matchup, but because Brian had such a fast start, Taylor's not just going to be able to bleed him out.
There we see a second Skurstag High Priest from Brian, and of course immediately taps 3 guys, makes another 5/5. So all of his creatures are tapped right now, with the exception of 1 5/5 demon. But
notably, there are 9 creatures in play, though. So which it does mean a Blasphemous Act. Remember Taylor playing Act 2.
Yeah.
Starts looking like a really good play. It was a pretty aggressive of Brian to make that second High Priest. It does almost threaten lethal next turn, but I'm not even sure that he actually gained a turn on his clock by making that play.
Yeah, Taylor can presumably go Reckoner, Land, Blasphemous Act, right?
Yeah, I don't think he's missing one of those pieces.
Right, he doesn't have the Reckoner. I'm saying, like, he could, if he had the Reckoner,
right,
he may have been able to do that. He's going to go ahead and Blasphemous Act here, though, and deal with the other side of the board. We're going to see Brian saving as many creatures as possible.
Yeah, what he's going to do is he's going to give Cartel Aristocrat protection from every color,
right,
so that it doesn't get Tragic Slipped post-combat. But this is going to do so much work. Remember that with all these creatures hitting the graveyard, that's 5 on one side and 2 on the other. That's going to be 7 points of drain from Blood Artist.
So even without the Reckoner, Taylor able to do quite a bit of damage with his Blood Artist. And Brian left with a Spirit Token, fresh off of that dead Doom Traveler, and Cartel Aristocrat. Taylor's side of the board clear as well, of course, and Taylor follows it up with Land, passes back. So
remember, Taylor, not only does he have 4 cards in hand to Brian's 2, he has a Lingering Souls in his graveyard, and that Blasphemous Act may have just sealed up the game for him.
Yeah, he's holding a Falconwrath Aristocrat. I caught a flash of that in Taylor's hand, so he's going to be able to presumably land that and do a good chunk of damage immediately.
Yeah, we see a 5th land from Brian activates his Gavany Township. Brian's going to, he correctly here is choosing to be aggressive. He can't actually sit back and deal with cards like Falconwrath Aristocrat because his hand just really isn't built to do that.
Right. So Taylor goes to 19, taking 5 from the Cartel Aristocrat and the Spirit token, both with a +1/+1 counter from Gavany Township. And there you see the Falconwrath Aristocrat from Taylor immediately swings in, knocking Brian to 2.
All right, now that it's threatening lethal here, Brian's going to have to answer. He may be able to Tragic Slip the Aristocrat. He really can't afford to leave back a second blocker for another possible Aristocrat. Right now, he's still with Gavany Township. He can threaten, 7 damage, then 9 if he used Township every turn. He still only has Taylor on a 3-turn clock.
Blood Artist will, well, hopefully for Brian, pad his life total a little bit, but I don't know that that's really going to be enough at this point.
Yeah, it's not going to do too much work here because it's very it's unlikely that this Spirit for Falconwrath Aristocrat trade is going to happen. All Taylor has to have is one more creature to stop that. Brian's going to need a more permanent answer for Falconwrath Aristocrat.
So he's going to swing in with the Cartel Aristocrat, knock Taylor to 16. He's got 3 mana open. Passes back to Taylor. Taylor now trying to figure out his options. I see a Lingering Souls, a Boros Reckoner, I believe at least 1 more land.
Yeah, and he also has the Lingering Souls in his graveyard.
Yeah.
So even if Taylor doesn't have a way to push lethal this turn, he can create so many blockers right now. It seems unlikely that he's going to be able to make a wall that'll be very hard for Brian to get through.
Yeah.
Remember, Brian himself does not have a Blasphemous Act because he's playing Junk Aristocrats,
right,
which means Taylor can really flood the board with creatures if he wants. He doesn't have to worry about getting Blood Artisted out.
So you see Falconwrath Aristocrat swings in, is blocked by the Spirit, and Taylor sacrifices his Spirit, Blood Artist triggers, and Brian now with the Morbid trigger can now tragic slip the Falconwrath Aristocrat too.
And a really heads-up play there by Brian. Rather than dealing 2 damage with the Spirit that turn, what he chose to do was he chose to tragic slip instead of main phase. He did it right there so that he could get another Spirit token off of Taylor. Right there,
right.
Taylor sacrificed Spirit token, assuming Brian didn't have an answer, but Brian actually did have the answer the
right.
whole time.
So Boros Reckoner to replace the Falconwrath Aristocrat on Taylor's side of the board. So Taylor has a Reckoner and a Spirit. It's a Lingering Soul.
Yep,
and Brian with a Spirit of his own and a Cartel Aristocrat, both with +1/+1 counters from Gavany Township, and a Blood Artist on his side.
Yeah, 2 points of drain there put Brian up to 4. He still needs to be careful about that Boros Reckoner that's on the table. His life total is pretty low. You have to assume he can't beat a Blasphemous Act, so he's not going to play around that. He needs to see a way to do 14.
Yeah, it's quite a journey he's going to have to make here.
It actually does seem possible. Right now he has, on the board he only has 5 power. He can make that 7 with a Township, which is a 2-turn clock. He's not actually worried about being dead next turn. He can just block with Blood Artist and chump the Reckoner. He's not that far from threatening a lethal attack here. The bigger issue, I think, is that once Taylor untaps, he has 2 Lingering Souls in the graveyard. The only creature that Brian's going to be able to attack with after this turn is the Cartel Aristocrat, and he's really only going to get to attack with it by giving it protection from white.
Right. So Brian doing some math, thinking about what he wants to do. Looks like he's decided on just the Spirit, so that's a 2/2, and of course he's going to go ahead and activate Gavany Township to pump all of his guys, so it's going to be for 3, going to knock Taylor to 11.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the Gavany Township actually put a counter on Blood Artist, because that means, that actually means the Boros Reckoner is going to deal damage if Brian chooses to chump block.
Right, it's kind of a funny downside to a Gavany Township.
Yeah.
Kind of a corner case, but it's relevant here against a Reckoner.
Yeah, so Brian, if Taylor just attacks with Boros Reckoner, Brian actually can block with Cartel Aristocrat, thanks to the order that the triggers will go on the stack. He would get the life gain off the Blood Artist before the Boros Reckoner dealt 4 to him, and it would take him to 1. If Taylor makes a full attack with both creatures, though, Brian's going to have no choice but to chump block with the Blood Artist.
We'll see what Taylor decides to do.
Yeah.
He's doing some math. Presumably.
Yeah, there's a lot of options that Taylor has here.
Yeah.
He does have. I mean, the biggest option is that he has 4 Lingering Souls tokens to make this turn. So the only card that he really has to watch out for is this Cartel Aristocrat. It's a 4/4 right now. So even if it turns into a 5/5 and then a 6/6, it's so it turns into a 5/5 and a 6/6. The next 2 turns, that is 11.
That's lethal, yeah.
Okay, so that's lethal. You have to add in the fact that some creatures will be dying. So it's possible that in 2 attacks he'll be dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, he has to make sure he has a bit of a clock. Obviously, if he finds an answer to the Cartel Aristocrat, then he's just in the clear.
So he's decided to swing with both, and I think as you were mentioning, Brian's going to have to chump block.
Yeah, and I mean this is just the play. If Taylor has so many Lingering Souls tokens that one swing of the Spirit token forces the chump block.
So Blood Artist.
Sorry.
Is going to actually, chump.
Get sacrificed to Cartel Aristocrat because he doesn't want it to deal damage to Boros Reckoner.
Right. And there's a tragic slip for the Cartel Aristocrat.
Yeah, that's in response to the sack. So if BBD wants to keep it alive, he's going to actually have to sack his other Spirit token as well.
Looks like that's what he's thinking about.
Well, I think he has to.
Yeah.
He doesn't obviously doesn't like that.
Right.
There's no choice here.
So that's what he does. Protects his Cartel Aristocrat by sacrificing both of his creatures, and
1 point of drain, 1 point of damage. Brian will stay at 4, putting Taylor down to 10.
Yeah. And Lingering Souls from Taylor, flashback, and another Lingering Souls from Taylor, flashback.
So 4 spirits. Brian does not actually have any full sweepers to deal with these. So I don't know if he has a draw that helps him here very much. His own Lingering Souls is probably his best out. But that's not even really an out at this point because the Blood Artist is off the table.
He's got quite the scenario to try to find himself a way out of. I didn't see what he drew. He's just got 2 cards in hand. He's got the Gavany Townships. It's ostensibly, I mean, effectively it's just 1 Gavany Township, even though he's got 2. He can't activate both.
Well, the best draw for him would be Lingering Souls here because then he could go in the Lingering Souls plus Township plan, which is, he'd have to trade some number of creatures here, which would be unfortunate, but then his Lingering Souls would be bigger.
Right.
Outside of that, I don't really see another way for him to stabilize here. He's gonna swing the Cartel Aristocrat. There's no reason to leave it back to block because he doesn't actually block Boros Reckoner with it. It would kill him to do so.
Yeah. So Aristocrat in the red zone. It's a 4-power Aristocrat because of Gavany Township. Threatening to be 5 power. Of course, I think if I'm Taylor.
Well, Taylor knows that play is not coming.
That's not.
That play is
that
fine for him.
Yeah.
The question is whether Taylor wants to chump block with 1 creature. It seems like it would be correct to do so, even though you're probably just giving Brian a free creature. Taylor's gonna take the damage, though.
Yeah. So he goes. Looks like he goes to 6, and there we have Lingering Souls, as you mentioned.
Well, it's the best card for Brian in this situation. I'm not even sure it's enough, but it's the one that gives him the most amount of play. The question is going to be whether or not how many of these can he keep alive?
So you see Lingering Souls cast and then immediately flash back. So 4 spirits for Brian to 5 spirits on Taylor's side of the board, and then there's Reckoner versus Cartel Aristocrat.
Yeah, if Taylor swings the entire team, Brian has to block at least 3 of the creatures. So you'd have to block a Spirit, the Reckoner.
And the Reckoner, yeah.
He would sacrifice the Spirit that's on the Reckoner. He would take 3 and go to 1. So he really only can keep 1 Spirit alive. But if Taylor has no flying blockers, then Brian's still 1 damage short. So how he's going to get that 6? Then he could in theory play another guy, push Cartel Aristocrat through, swing with the 1 Spirit that's left over. But that's only 5.
So Gavany Township.
Well, the thing is, say Taylor swings the team. Brian has to block 3 creatures, which he probably does.
Okay,
he's
so
left with a Spirit and a Cartel Aristocrat. Okay. That's only 5 damage right now, and actually the Cartel Aristocrat he's probably going to need to sacrifice something to it to get it through.
Okay.
Because Taylor will have a play, and if Brian plays a creature, then he won't be able to Township, and he'll be a damage short.
Right. Okay.
So as long as Taylor has any creature in his hand, he can all-out swing here pretty effectively.
There are a number of 1-drops that Brian could possibly draw, so he could.
If his last card's a land, maybe he could go 1-drop land, or maybe he has a 1-drop in his hand and the draw's a land.
Something like that. Yeah. I'm just trying to think of other outs for him.
Yeah, that would work. So if if his hand is something like Doomed Traveler right now and he draws his last land.
So Taylor's going to go ahead and play it safe, it looks like, and just swinging with a Reckoner and a Spirit,
Now,
which is exactly 4. This is going to give...
yeah, this is a play that's pretty dangerous for Taylor to be making.
I think he thinks he's making a conservative play.
Well, the problem is leaving Brian with 3 creatures and a Gavany Township is a very dangerous thing to be doing. If Taylor has no follow-up creature, which it seems like he doesn't, then he has to make this play, and it's really unfortunate for him. But as long as if he had any follow-up creature in his hand, then he probably should have been playing more aggressively. He does have 2 cards remaining.
Yeah, didn't see what they were.
Yeah.
What does Brian have? Brian now with 2 cards after his draw for the turn, and
Brian can just play the Township game here. He certainly, if he swings his team, Taylor's going to have to, well, he probably can't swing, he cannot swing the entire team. Because Taylor can just, he only has to block 2 things. He can block Cartel Aristocrat and a Spirit, take 4, swing back for lethal. So the question is really, how many things can Brian attack with? It's a really interesting balancing act.
So
he does have the
Isolated
land.
Chapel is the land for the turn from Brian.
He does have the Township.
He's doing some math too.
Yeah, the Cartel Aristocrat can get through.
Yeah.
Actually, Lindsey can let it. Taylor Lindsey can let it get through this turn because it can only threaten to be a 5/5. Remember, he only needs a couple more attack. Like Brian has to be careful that he leaves enough blockers back.
Right. It's weird. It's like Brian either, I don't know what he's got. So okay, he's gonna swing with all but 1.
So that's an interesting play. I don't know what Brian has left in his hand at this
right.
point.
That's the odd. That's the question. That's the big variable.
Yeah, you'd think Taylor will just put 1 Spirit on Cartel Aristocrat and take the rest of the damage. If he does that, then he turns the rest of his team sideways, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 creatures. Remember, yeah, Brian is at 3 right now. So it'd be 5 creatures, and Brian needs 2 blockers to make that matter.
So Brian has.
And Brian has 1 card in his hand.
Yeah,
so
it has to be a blocker.
It'd have to be a double blocker. I'm not sure what it would be.
Is it possible to Blood Artist to...
If his last card's a Blood Artist, he would have played it pre-combat.
Yeah, that's what I would think too. Just trying to figure
right. If it's, it could be a Lingering Souls, which is amazing. Another Lingering Souls is a great draw here, but
he's already flashed back the one he drew prior to this.
Yep,
he cast it and flashed it back in the same turn. Taylor. And to decide on his blockers here.
And he's going to double block a Spirit token, which that is lethal, isn't it?
Yeah, wouldn't that be lethal? Because unless he was just saying the Spirits are blocking Spirits. I don't.
No.
He chumped. I mean, he double blocked it. That's confusing, right? Because the 2 from the Spirit and 5 from
that's
the
7. We're not sure. We'll figure this out in a second here. But it does appear that the game's still on. So
that's okay. So now we're getting real Spirits here.
Sure,
that's fine. Yeah. So the Gavany, the Aristocrat was a 4/4. The Spirits were 1/1s, but he.
Okay, so there were 3 Spirits in play. So it looks like he put 1. He put 1 on Cartel Aristocrat and 2 on a Spirit token. Is what happened there. So he triple blocked. We missed 1 off camera.
Oh, that's what it was.
And then Taylor Lindsey and then he actually manages to close the game out. He draws a Blood Artist. He turns the whole team sideways. There's 3 attackers in the Blood Artist. There's no way for BBD not to take 3 damage on that attack.
Right.
He knows it and scoops them.
Yeah. So wow, that was a game fought right on the edge of the cliff there.
Yeah, I mean, and Taylor,
really tight.
It was really some swift navigating there by Braun-Duin. I think the thing he might regret about that game was playing the second Skurstog High Priest. It really opened himself up to Blasphemous Act, and after a Blasphemous Act, he was really left with not much of a board at all.
Right.
He navigated his way to almost back to victory, but in the end, it was too much for him to come back with. Taylor did have a lot of lands, which opened a door to him a door for Brian to win, but then that top deck Blood Artist was enough.
Yeah, so you think, okay, so he keeps that High Priest, that's, you know, he's down a 5/5 and
He's down a 5/5. I don't even know if it costs him a turn on his clock is the thing.
Yeah.
The 1 5/5 versus 2 5/5s are pretty similar, and it would give him a little more game at the end there.
Right, after the, because Taylor would have likely still tried to cast that Blasphemous Act in that situation if he had enough mana. I don't know that he...
Right. I mean, it's not certain he would have won, because in a Lingering Souls fight, Skurstag High Priest is actually not that relevant. You can chump it for a long time.
Right.
So the game may still have ended the same way. Blasphemous Act is very good in this matchup.
It certainly is. And especially in concert with the Reckoner.
Yeah, there's also the thing that if
like
Brian
that whole
doesn't make
combo.
that pressure, Taylor might actually hold the Blasphemous Act for a turn, and then if he gets Blasphemous Act Reckonered, it actually is 20 damage
Right.
there. So there is a good argument made to playing the second High Priest.
Yeah. So on to the sideboards, we have an additional Blasphemous Act that Taylor is able to bring in. I think that's he's got one copy of Profit Loss, which has been picking up.
Well, it's pretty good in this matchup.
Yeah, it's a nice little, what is it, Zealous Persecution kind of thing?
Right, it's pretty expensive for Zealous Persecution, but it's actually still very good in this matchup. You know, in a Lingering Souls fight, a Zealous Persecution effect, any sort, you know, -1/-1 to all your opponent's creatures, +1/+1 to all yours, is such a swing. It sweeps your opponent's board. On top of that, it deals a lot of damage. I'm sure we'll see that being used. Other than that, there's not too many cards. You know, he has another Blasphemous Act, which we probably do see getting played.
So Profit Loss, Blasphemous Act, those are the obvious inclusions. You know, I love Obsidat and everything, but...
Well, the problem with Obsidat in this matchup is that Lingering Souls is a good answer to it, Cartel Aristocrat's a good answer to it. It's not going to get through, it's probably just too expensive.
It's just going to drain for 2 you know, like you're going to hope to just sit there and do that the whole time.
And that's probably not worth
even
5
worth
mana.
5 mana, right. So,
on Brian's side, I think he has a little bit more, he has some more action going on. He does have 2 Profit Losses, so he's also very aware of the matchup. If he wants, he has access to Deathrite Shaman. He also has access to Abrupt Decay and Garruk Relentless.
Abrupt Decay, a nice answer to Boros Reckoner.
Exactly. One of the only ways to answer one of the only painless ways to answer a Boros Reckoner.
That's a big one. So we'll likely see those.
Yeah, another card you could see being played, and I'm not sure it would be played in this matchup because he does have 2 Sin Collectors. If this matchup, I'm not sure how worried Brian is about the Blasphemous Act in this matchup.
Right.
The Sin Collector's still pretty live. There's Tragic Slip, Orzhov Charm, Lingering Souls, and Blasphemous Act as instants and sorceries in Taylor's deck. So the Sin Collector has a decent chance of hitting something. And as we saw, the Blasphemous Act can be really backbreaking.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he does. How much space is he going to have?
And that's really the question. He has the cards which I see him probably not using. Sorin, Lord of Innistrad, only seems okay in this matchup.
And those could probably just come out directly for the Abrupt Decays.
Right. So the question is, you know, how much, what is his game plan in the matchup? I'm sure I mean, we know that Profit Loss is going to be involved in it. But other than that, yeah, I'm not positive. So we'll see how he chooses to play it.
Yeah. And we're underway. Brian leads with a Shockland, as does Taylor. Both into play tapped, and on turn 2, BBD has a Blood Artist.
And Blood Artist...
See a Tragic Slip in Taylor's hand. I believe he's actually got multiple Tragic Slips. He's going to go ahead and use one now on the Blood Artist.
Yeah, and it happens in this mirror that some of the best cards are not the sideboard cards. They're the main deck cards, like Blood Artist.
And Taylor passes back after playing a Sacred Foundry tapped. Brian with a 3rd land and immediately taps all 3 to cast a Lingering Soul.
Brian now with all his colors of mana online, and right now both players playing a lot of the cards that are just in both of the decks. So it is still, to a certain degree, a mirror match.
Except for the Sacred Foundries, the red mana. So, Cartel Aristocrat from Taylor. 2nd Sacred Foundry tap for Taylor as well. And Brian on his 4th turn.
It does look like he's boarded in Abrupt Decays, if we see his hand correctly. Presumably for Boros Reckoner. Right now, he could also get Cartel Aristocrat with it. It's one of the few chances he's going to get to kill Cartel Aristocrat.
Yeah, I imagine he would take that opportunity.
Well, it depends whether or not he thinks it's actually worth killing.
Okay.
You know, it may be that he just doesn't care about the Cartel Aristocrat too much in the matchup. It is only a 2/2 after all.
So 2 spirits swing in and knock Taylor to 17.
And we see Skurstog High Priest in BBD's hand as well. So it may be that he wants to get, he's hoping to get this High Priest down before he casts Abrupt Decay. He's going to go High Priest and Doomed Traveler. Someone said he's really not able to play around Blasphemous Act very well.
Yeah, it almost seems like he's just going to go ahead and hope that Taylor doesn't have it. We see there is one copy of Blasphemous Act in Taylor's hand.
5 creatures on the battlefield means that that card only costs 4 mana. With an untapped land, Taylor can immediately Blasphemous Act here.
Yeah.
And that card really, I think, is shaping up to be a trump in the matchup. The Junk Aristocrats deck is more redundant. It's a little faster. You know, it has access to Young Wolves in addition to Doomed Travelers and Varolses in addition to Cartel Aristocrats. So it's just a lot better at making 5/5s and a lot better at being a tokens deck, but it doesn't have that powerful Haymaker that Act 2 does.
So Taylor looks like he's pondering a Lingering Souls of his own, and he does cast that.
Yeah, I
making the Blasphemous Act even cheaper, but at the expense of his own creatures. So it looks like Cartel Aristocrat's going to go ahead and get in for 2. BBD takes that, untaps.
Yeah, so the lack of a 4th land from Taylor meant that he did not have access to casting Blasphemous Act that turn. So it's interesting that Lingering Souls kind of works as a ramp spell in this situation into Blasphemous Act. And Taylor's really here would be hoping that Brian continues to commit to the board.
So you see Doom Traveler and 2 Spirits swinging into the red zone for Braun-Duin. We've got Taylor dropping to 14, and Brian plays a land. Looks like he's got a spell. He's going to flash back Lingering Souls, and that's exactly what Taylor wants.
Yeah, Brian's playing without the fear of Blasphemous Act. He must just, and you know, it's not that he doesn't know that it's there. Sometimes the best way to play around the hate is to pretend that your opponent doesn't have it.
Yeah.
If you feel like it's a card you just can't beat, and I think that's what Brian's doing in this situation. Unfortunately for him, Taylor does have it.
Yeah, now it costs literally like a red.
Yep, 1 red mana. And because of the, well, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 creatures on Taylor's side. Taylor actually has the, on Brian's side. Oh wow, needs to go Blood Artist. Taylor can give his Cartel Aristocrat protection from red before doing it.
Yeah.
He's not going to do that.
It looks like he's going to respond.
Okay, he's responding to his own
priority.
spell.
Yeah.
So yeah, you would do it that way. If there were exactly 8 creatures on the battlefield, you would have to do it this way.
Right.
Because there's a lot more, it doesn't really matter. But it's probably good practice to cast this way.
Sure. So you see the Blood Artist comes down, followed immediately by Blasphemous Act, which Taylor responds. Looks like he wants to respond to it. It's just kind of. Looks like
you can do that. You can respond to your own spells.
Yeah,
there should not be an issue for that.
It's exactly the same thing.
You hold on to the control key.
That's right.
That's who you play online.
So I believe he's holding priority, but we've got an Abrupt Decay for the Blood Artist from BBD to mitigate some of this damage
now,
here.
The thing is that, yeah, Taylor still gets to sacrifice all the spear. You know, if Taylor's responding to his own spell, he gets the chance to respond to his own spell before Brian gets a chance to play that Abrupt Decay. So all 3 of those, Blood Artist should get to see all 3 of those hit the graveyard.
So we'll see. So that should put Taylor to 17. It does.
Yep.
And Brian to 16. And then you see the Blasphemous Act. And of course, the Aristocrat survives with Pro Red. And Doomed Traveler becomes a spirit on Brian's side.
And once again, we just see Brian's board decimated by a Blasphemous Act there.
Yeah. Cartel Aristocrat gets in, or at least swings, and we have a Tragic Slip from Brian to deal with it. So
interestingly enough, I'm surprised that Cartel Aristocrat did not have protection from black there. We saw 3 creatures sacrificed to it. I can't imagine that Brian only. I mean, one chose red. He must have chose green and white as the other 2 colors, or maybe he just didn't say what color he was choosing.
Yeah, he may have just gone, you know, red. I don't know. He obviously left a window for a Tragic Slip to resolve, and that's what it did. But Taylor's going to repopulate his board here with a second Cartel Aristocrat and a Blood Artist after taking 1 from that Spirit that was left on Brian's side. Yeah,
so Brian, using all of his removal spells, he used that Tragic Slip on a Cartel Aristocrat, which means that Blood Artist is likely going to get to survive here, which will make it almost impossible for Braun-Duin to race.
You see Brian's graveyard. You can see an abrupt decay and one tragic slip. So he should still have a couple more tragic slips and a couple more abrupt decays, but I don't know that in hand. Oh, look, never mind. There's an abrupt decay.
So,
as I say, he
well, and removal spells are good here, especially when there's something like Blood Artist that you have to answer. But Brian still is still in the unenviable position of having to push damage. Both those two will drain because of the order. No, sorry, just one drain,
right,
and then Brian swings
one.
first.
So he had I said he should have more of both of those cards, and he had exactly one more of both.
Right.
Of those cards,
so now
so
they're going to get into a little bit of a top deck where Brian has 0 cards in hand, Taylor
right.
Lindsey with 2 in hand. Remember, both these players fighting for their tournament life right now.
Right. They're both 2-1 at this point in the tournament. We have a Lingering Souls from Taylor. I believe that one was flashed back.
Yep, that was flashback from the earlier one.
Yeah, and so Taylor with 2 spirits to Brian's 1. And I believe Taylor has 1 card in hand. Brian just drew for his turn, so we're all locked up here with Taylor with the 1 spirit trump.
So Brian has to...
Oh, actually, Taylor has a couple cards in hand,
he has
including
2...
a tragic slip.
Yeah, so the interesting thing right here is that Brian has to decide whether or not he wants to trade spirits or whether or not he wants to wait to try to draw into Gavany Township.
He's going to trade spirits here as Taylor swings with both of his. Brian goes ahead and trades 1. So takes 1 from Taylor's.
Yeah. Township gives Brian a late game actually that Taylor Lindsey can't deal with. But outside of that, Taylor has slightly better creatures in his deck. He has Falconwrath Aristocrat and Blood and Boros Reckoner, which are both cards Brian doesn't have. There are some cards that are pretty good for Brian right now, though. Varolz will be a pretty strong draw as well.
We haven't seen that yet this match. Cartel Aristocrat comes down for Taylor.
And Brian draws out of his sideboard Profit Loss as the last card in his hand. Typically a strong card. Right here, it's a little weak.
Yeah, basically just trades for a spirit, which
right.
is not ideal.
I think this would have been one of the arguments for not making that trade with the spirit token earlier, is that Brian has some cards that really like having the creature in play.
Right.
Regardless,
Boros Reckoner for Taylor, and it looks like Taylor's
he's
taking over
He
this
is
game.
pulling ahead.
He's already up a game here, and he's in good shape right now. Reckoner, Aristocrat, Spirit, all coming in, going to knock Brian to 4. And we've got 2 tragic slips, I believe, in Taylor's hand, so even if Brian's able to land something, it's likely going to eat some removal. There's a Blood Artist for exactly that purpose.
Yeah, so the Blood Artist won't be... And remember, Taylor has the tragic slip.
Right.
And he's going to have to Profit Loss in response to this tragic slip. That's... If he actually fuses it, it's going to kill his own Blood Artist. And I don't... See if he catches that. If he wants to keep Blood Artist alive, he has to just Profit. If he casts Profit Loss, then it will trigger Morbid by killing the Spirit token. I think Brian looks to Profit Loss. Now I think he just caught that. Wait, now he has to decide whether he wants the Blood Artist alive or dead.
Yeah. It's a tough situation right now.
I think you need it alive. I don't think if it's... I think if you let it die here... Okay, he's going to go ahead and fuse it. That doesn't...
Profit Loss.
So yeah, it'll drain for 2, because the first one will kill the Spirit, the second one will kill the Blood Artist, and Brian will go to 1. And okay, and tragic slip it again.
Yeah.
That's
yeah, that was Taylor.
That was there. So Taylor Lindsey there missed that it would be turned on as Morbid. Oh, so no, that doesn't miss it. That actually is a good play because now the only 1 drain happens. So apologies there. That's really heads up. 1 drain happens. Brian only goes to 5, and there's 5 power on Taylor Lindsey's side of the board. So by playing the second tragic slip, Taylor Lindsey does secure the victory. That's very very good play.
He shaved off a turn that Brian was going to have. You know, it was likely that Taylor was going to take it at the next turn, but
he's still very far ahead. But there's no, especially when you see Brian use his last card that way. Yeah. There's no reason not to aggressively use your removal spells, and Taylor does exactly that.
Yeah,
staying alive 3-1 with